welcome to Project Anatomy, very first video. Thanks for joining me today, and what we'll do today is we'll do a quick overview of anatomy and physiology, some definitions, and a very important principle which I'll get to at the end. Let's get right into it. What is anatomy? Anatomy is the structure. Anatomy is about the structure and the relationship of one structure to another structure. Now, that's different than physiology. Physiology is the function. Physiology can only be explained in terms of the anatomy, right? Without understanding the structure, you can't have a full understanding of why that structure works the way it does. So when we look at anatomy textbook or physiology textbook, you'll see a lot of physiological values, body temperature, blood pressure, etc. When we talk about those values, we're talking about those values in terms of the reference man and the reference woman. Now, what is the reference man? About 155 pounds, healthy 22-year-old young man. Same thing with the reference woman, except she's about 125 pounds. So, that's important because people always wonder, hey, how could this body temperature or this blood pressure value be the same across all? It's not the same. We vary in many, many different ways, but that's just the best way to teach, right? Because you have to have some sort of standard. So, on topics of anatomy, gross anatomy, that can be broken down into regional anatomy, systemic anatomy. Regional anatomy, well, gross anatomy, first of all, is anatomy that's visible to the naked eye, okay? Your heart, lungs, kidneys, you can see that with your naked eye. Regional anatomy, that's when you look at one specific region. Let's say we're looking at the forearm. Regional anatomy is the study of all the structures within this forearm. So the skin, the underlying bone, the vessels, the nerves, the connective tissue, all that stuff. Systemic anatomy, on the other hand, is when you study one system. Say, for example, you're studying the cardiovascular system. You're going to study the heart and all the blood vessels in the entire body, right? Because that's the entire system. So, microscopic anatomy. Self-explanatory. You're using a microscope that can be subdivided as well. Cytology, histology. Cytology is the study of cells. Histology is the study of tissue. Now, there's a bunch of other different types of anatomical studies. Developmental anatomy, that can be broken down into embryology. That's one subdivision. Embryology is the study of the changes a human goes through before birth. Pathological anatomy, the changes our anatomy goes through caused by disease. Radiographic anatomy, that's when you study a structure with X-ray technology. Now, before we get into physiology, I want to talk about some important skills to learning anatomy, which are terminology, observation, and manipulation. So, terminology, you need to understand what a lot of the roots. Histo, you need to know that means tissue. Logi, that means study of. Cyto, that means cell. You need to understand the roots, prefixes, suffixes, or you won't really get anywhere. Observation, self-explanatory. When you study, let's say you're studying a bone, you're studying, can't think of any bones right now. Let's say you're studying the ulna, that's a bone in the forearm. You want to pick it up, you want to look at all the different markings, you want to look at the size, how long it is. Then there's manipulation. That's when you actually want to look at how, a good example of manipulation is when you're studying a joint. Depending on the type of joint it is, the bone that's connected to it will only move in certain ways, right? And in living organisms, there's palpation. You can feel a lot of digestive processes by pushing into the stomach. There's auscultation. You can listen to lung sounds, heartbeat with a stethoscope. And okay, so that's sort of some key skills to learning anatomy. Physiology. Renal physiology is how the kidney works. Cardiovascular physiology is how the heart works and how the vasculature works. Neurological physiology is how the brain works, how the nerves work, etc. Physiology focuses a lot on the cellular and the molecular level. The reason that is because the way our body functions is so heavily reliant on those fundamental, at that, the cellular level. That's one of the most fundamental levels of the human body, as well as the molecular level, because it builds up, and we'll do an entire video on the different levels. Physics is also very important in studying physiology because you have electrical currents running throughout the body, you have blood pressure, and whenever that's relevant, we'll talk about it. Now, last but not least is the principle of complementarity between structure and function. And this is key to learning anatomy and physiology, and I kind of went over it when we started. You cannot understand the physiology if you don't understand the underlying anatomy. They complement each other. I'll give you a concrete example. Bones. The purpose of bones, the function is to protect our bodies. Now, what are bones made of? Deposits of hard minerals, right? So it only makes sense that the structure, which is very hard and rigid, functions in a way that will protect our body, right? Very simple, very intuitive. Blood flows in one direction, right? Why is that? Well, because there's structural valves in our body that prevent backflow. Again, structure and function complement each other. So, okay, I think that's a good overview. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so we defined anatomy, physiology. I gave you some subdivisions, and we explained the complementarity principle. All right, I think that's good for our first video. Not a lot of vital information in this video. It's just a brief overview. All right, so thanks for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back for more. Take care.